There was a time when Stax Records was the place, a label that was turning out the biggest hits in North America. There was a new documentary about Stax. Today on the podcast, the group chat is standing by. We're going to get into how this one record label changed modern music. I'm Elamin Abdul-Mahmoud. This is Commotion. Look, there is a new documentary out today about the legendary Memphis record label that changed the music industry. That is Stax Records.
Isaac Hayes, Sam and Dave, Carla Thomas, Otis Redding.
We were energized, successful. That music was where I wanted to be.
I know a place.
That is a clip from Stax Soulsville U.S.A. It is a 4-part series about how the iconic label changed music in the 60s and 70s and became a part of the soundtrack of the civil rights movement. Ericka Blount is a professor of media journalism at Howard University. Rob Bowman is a musicologist who is also a co-executive producer of the series. And TJ Armour is a freelance writer. TJ, Rob, and Ericka, welcome to the show. I'm so happy to have you here. Thanks for coming on.
Glad to be here.
Oh,
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Very, very glad to be here.
I can see you guys are just excited to get into it. Let's do it. Let's get into it. Ericka, maybe let's do an overview how everybody got into Stax. But Ericka, I'm going to start with you. You grew up loving this music. Can you just describe a moment that really stays with you when you first heard a Stax song?
Sure. So one of my favorite songs is Hyperbolic Syllabic Sesquidaily Mystic. Did I get that right? I did it? Okay.
You did.
So, yeah. So my dad is a DJ, was a DJ rather. He just passed, but a few years ago. But I remember sitting with him in front of his record collection and listening to records all the time. And so that one, I just remember it because it's just so funky. It's just, you can't not dance or sing or whatever. It's amazing. So I just remember being with him and listening to that and thinking like, wow, that's
Listen,
it.
You know we have a clip of it ready, so let's just play a little bit of it right now.
Tell me what I say. Sleep at night, hyperbolic trip, but that's all right.
I wish that people listening on the radio and on podcasts could see your faces as the music plays because everyone is just kind of vibing as we listen to the music. Rob, what was it for you? How did you get into the Stax sound?
It's simple. When I was 7, the Beatles changed my life. When I was 8, it was the Rolling Stones, 9, Bob Dylan. But the Stones covered That's How Strong My Love Is, which they learned from Otis Redding, who learned it from another Memphis singer, O.V. Wright. I adored that song. And I remember Mick Jagger talking in an interview about Otis Redding. So I went to my local store and I asked for That's How Strong My Love Is. They didn't have it, but they did have Otis's new single. I was 10 years old, was Try a Little Tenderness. I took that record home, put the needle on the vinyl, it's spinning, and suddenly whole new sonic world opened up. It was magical.
Yeah, I love the idea, first of all, of you at 7 and then 8 and then 9 be like, well, this is now my new entire personality. And I say this because I have a 7-year-old, and I wish you would go to the record store and ask for Otis Redding, but that's not happening yet. But that's maybe
You got to get him hip.
That's my work to do. That's my work to do. TJ, okay, let's go to you. What was the song for you?
I think the song for me that I remember that first drew my attention was Sam and Dave's "Hold On, I'm Coming."
Yeah.
That song, I just remember it around. I remember hearing it a lot, and I just remember how catchy it was to me. And I was probably about 7, like Rob at the time, and digging through my parents' record collection, like Ericka. But that's the song that I remember initially, and then later on as I got older, I would go back and just kind of do more research on the label and find out, some of the other artists and great songs. But Sam and Dave's Hold On I'm Coming is the one for me.
To this date, I don't think I've ever heard instruments that sound as warm as they do on Hold On I'm Coming. Actually, we have to play a bit of Sam and Dave. Hold On I'm Coming. Let's hear it.
I don't think they're warm. They're on fire.
Let's hear it.
Warm doesn't do it.
Right.
Here's the problem with this conversation, guys, is I want to talk about the music, but also I just want to hear the music for the whole conversation. But there's a lot to talk about. Maybe we'll go to you, Rob. Rob, what was Stax doing that nobody else was doing at the time?
I'm sorry, say it again.
What was Stax doing that at the time that nobody else was doing?
Stax was doing a ton of things that no one else was doing, but probably the initial exceptional thing about it is here's a white-owned company, later became black and white co-owned, later totally black-owned, but for the very beginning, 1960, Memphis, a totally segregated city, city where Dr. King gets killed 8 years later. It's an integrated company, integrated in the studio, integrated at the levels of secretaries, integrated at the level of receptionists. It was an oasis of racial sanity in an incredibly insane world. And that music, it's black music. There's no way anybody can suggest it's not. But there's also white influences coming in through people like Steve Cropper and Duck Dunn. Yeah. It's a very interesting hybrid. Black-centered, but it's got some unique twists. Open six dyads that Steve gets from country music and the guitar parts. But at its root, it's gospel with secular lyrics. It's the same sound that creates the blueprint for Southern soul. When you're hearing Aretha Franklin, for example, recording at Muscle Shoals, you're hearing
it's because Stax
filtered through non-Stax players, and in Aretha's case, a non-Stax vocalist. The blueprints started at Stax.
We're going to talk a little bit about how these sounds were sort of originated from specific different homes in just a minute. But Ericka, maybe you want to expand on that a little bit, because I heard you sort of nodding and trying to get in there as Rob was sort of describing what Stax was doing.
Yeah, no, Al Bell talked to me about how he, in a sense, found Aretha when she was 16 years old with the song Never Grow Old. And so, I think Stax was doing something completely different from what Motown. I wouldn't compare the two necessarily, but I think of like Stax as like, that hole in the wall place you go to eat and the food is delicious.
It's really good,
and Motown is, it's a good meal. It's delicious, but it doesn't have that where you got to keep coming back to it.
Yeah.
So cuisine.
Exactly. So, and Stax had a little bit of everything, from Carla Thomas. My mother's favorite song was Gee Whiz. Like, they had a little bit of everything. That's what
So the idea that Rob sort of expanded on just there, Ericka, the idea that, at a time, we get a little bit of this in the first episode, right? Like the idea that like this is a label that hired black and white musicians to work together. This label, which again, like Memphis, where Martin Luther King Jr. was killed, like this is a pretty significant deal. Why was hiring black and white musicians such a significant thing for Stax to do, Ericka?
I think, like Rob said, like it was during segregation, so it was kind of not necessarily unheard of, but it was unusual for Memphis, particularly. And all that was going on, particularly after the assassination of Martin Luther King. But even before that, the Lorraine Hotel was this, sort of refuge for the musicians.
Yeah, it was a hangout, right?
Yeah.
They'd each talk. Mr. Bailey's Chicken, who's one of the co-owners, everybody loved. I've heard about this chicken forever. The swimming pool, they were always there. Wilson Pickett come into town, he'd be staying there.
Right.
To go meet him, they'd co-write Midnight Hour. The Lorraine was central to the Stax story.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit about how much of a risk they were taking by being ahead of their time on segregation that way?
Yeah, I know. In the documentary, Respect Yourself, I think it's Wayne, talks about how, when they had to go to places that were segregated, he didn't know what to do as a white musician. He didn't know whether he should go in and then face, all of the musicians who were Black, or if he should, he didn't know what to do. And so what he did was he asked one of the musicians to just go in for him and and he ate in the car.
And also,
yeah. Go ahead.
They also had situations where in the studio things were cool, but they'd leave and they'd be on the sidewalk out front, and a Black and a white musician might be together, and a cop would come down and scream at a U-turn and get out and start hassling the Black musician, and going, is he bothering you to the white guy? And of course, they're friends.
Right. They were just playing together in a collaboration just moments ago. Yeah.
Black and white together like that was unheard of at that time. It was completely a radical thing to do.
So I just want to play a quick example of what one of those collaborations would have sounded like. I'm Elamin Abdul-Mahmoud. This show is called Commotion. And today on the podcast, the new documentary Stax Soulsville U.S.A. is out. Ericka Blount is here. Rob Bowman is here. TJ Armour is here. And we are talking about the significance of this iconic record label. What you just heard is, of course, a little bit of Booker T and the MGs' Green Onions, probably one of the most essential tracks of the Memphis soul sound that came from Stax. TJ, we talked a little bit about the impact the Stax had on rock and roll, but the Stax sound was also very much a product of Memphis. What was it about Memphis that made the Stax sound so unique, you think?
Well, I think with remnants of the migration and just the people that came to settle in Memphis, they brought some of that soul from further south with them, and just the melting pot, as we've been talking about with the integration of musicians and just the melting pot. It all came together for this really raw and gritty but soulful sound that essentially sounded like nothing else. Obviously Motown was quote unquote one of its rivals of the day. We know Motown had that factory assembly line way of producing songs, and it made for a more smoother sound. And but Stax was kind of the opposite of that. So it was the grit, it was the raw, it was the uncut soul of the music that set it aside from everything else.
I love the facial expressions you're making as you talk about the grit. You're like, it's the grit, man.
That's it.
You got to put a little sauce on it, as you even just say.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
You got to also think of Memphis's rich musical heritage. WPIA in October 1948 in Memphis, first Black appeal station in America. It had an incredible jug band tradition in the 20s. It had been a gospel city forever, the seat of the Church of God in Christ. The post-war Black quartets in Memphis were insane. B.B. King, Bobby Bland, a very different style of blues than you got up in Chicago. I mean, Memphis had this history. So if you lived within 120 miles, which is Jackson, Mississippi, Little Rock, Nashville, St. Louis,
all feed into
Memphis was the place you were going to come if you wanted to be a musician.
Okay, we're going to take a quick pause. We're going to come back in just a moment. We have a lot more to talk about when it comes to Stax Records. Okay, we are back, and can I just play you guys another clip from the show?
When I got to Stax, and I see all of these black guys and a bunch of white guys, you got to be kidding me. This is who these guys are, because I hadn't seen them before. Blew my mind immediately. I could sense that there was a close-knit family dynamic there, and I found it inspiring.
Al Bell, the Stax Records executive, he's chatting with the energy and the inspiration in the studio room. Ericka, whether we're talking about Stax and the sound coming out of Memphis, or the Motown sound coming out of Detroit, or the blues from Mississippi, these sounds were as much about the music as they were about the community where they originated from. Can you talk a little bit about that, about how these different communities shape these sounds?
Yeah, I think that particularly Stax was like they were the pride of the community. Like they were so, even when we were talking a little bit about when Martin Luther King was assassinated, they and the riots happened afterwards, they were no one bothered Stax because they
they knew
the community so and then when you think further on to Watt Stax and Watt Stax was amazing. If anybody has not seen, like, you should see that. But charged the community $1 to participate in that. Aided the community in Memphis, just generally speaking. And so I think the community was very much a part. The music also reflected the community and the culture. So I think the community was like they're intertwined with the music.
Of course.
Motown's come up a few times here. And if you think about the differences of those two labels, it's all about the differences in those two cities. Memphis, land is not a problem. They built a few multi-story buildings downtown and then realized we don't need to do this. We can just keep moving up from the Mississippi.
Sure.
Detroit's hardcore, much larger industrial city. Memphis is about the fraternal, personalized South. You hear that in the groove. In Detroit, it's an industrialized capitalist. Time is money, and you're not in the groove. You hear it in the density of the productions. Much more dense in Motown. Much more space in Stax. Things are more relaxed in Memphis. Human ecology has everything to do with sounds that come out of different regions.
Rob, I gotta say, I've never thought about the literal geography as and its influence on the music.
It's important.
I'm gonna sit with that.
Comes out of Minneapolis.
No, of course,
it all connects.
Again. But let me ask you this, Rob. If that's the case, though, I feel like saying the name Motown, it gives people an immediate feeling, like an immediate sense. There's a familiarity with the idea of Motown. Why do you think we don't talk about Stax in the same breath as Motown? Because I feel like this documentary is a bit of an attempt at a corrective of that, if you will.
It is. And my book was an attempt to correct that. There was 8 books at Motown at that point. Nothing had been written about Stax.
Yeah.
And I think it's quite simple. Berry Gordy designed Stax as Hitsville, USA. I'm sorry, Berry Gordy designed Motown as Hitsville, USA.
Yeah.
He did R&D, research design, on what black music crossed over to the pop charts. He wanted all of the money he could get in America. Capitalized, industrialized North. And he got massive hits on the white pop charts and massive hits on the black R&B charts.
Yeah.
Stax was a much more, as TJ has expressed, a down-home sound. A much more rootsy sound, a much more gospel-based sound. There's gospel in Motown, but not nearly the way it is at Stax. And Black America supported Stax. White America, much less than people think. If you look at Otis Redding's, for example, Try a Little Tenderness, number 4 in the R&B charts, number 25 or 26 on the pop charts.
Wow.
That gap was there for the majority of Stax artists. Many people like Johnny Taylor dominated the black charts for a long time. Very, didn't permeate the white charts very much. So I think that's really the reason. And unfortunately, white institutions control much of our media. And so the history gets sold as Motown as this, important giant. And Stax is kind of not talked about as much.
Because
it's wrong, but that's
I think too that I think the musicians are the kind of musicians that feel like they don't necessarily, like, they can be superstars in Memphis and that's enough. Whereas Motown, there was this aspirational element to it where I think Stax, they're fine with representing Memphis for the rest of their lives. You know what I mean? Like that's
That comes from the top to some degree. Berry Gordy's goals, as opposed to Jim Stewart and Al Bell was very aspirational.
Yeah,
Jim
he was.
Stewart once told an engineer who said, if we put a bridge in a song, we can get a pop hit. And Jim said, I don't give a good goddamn if we sell another record to white people. And Jim's white, but he was in love with the sound that had been created by accident initially at this label. Yeah. And he didn't have the same attitude, but that's a Memphis attitude.
TJ, what's your take on this? The idea that, Motown was actually trying to specifically aspire for the crossover, for the sort of the wider appeal, and Stax was not interested in that kind of take.
Yeah, I think it speaks to the greater like issue of, well, not issue, but the greater way it is in which like some things are not as palatable to a wider audience, to a mass audience. Yeah. And I think Stax is essentially that. It was, like I said, it was gritty, it was raw, it was a much more unpolished sound, but still very again soulful. So I think that's the juxtapose there, because as everyone said, Motown was kind of created to be a it's centered in Black artists, but it was created to make pop charts, whereas Stax did not care so much about that, and it reflected in the sound and in the way that they put the music together, the type of music they put out. So I think that was just the big difference. I like to equate it to, as far as hip hop in 1997, Mace on Bad Bad Records was everywhere. His sound was very smooth, very melodic. Yeah. And then the next year, 1998, DMX comes out and essentially changes the game with a much more gritty, hard sound. And it's the same difference, whereas sometimes that more gritty, soulful, it hits people a little bit harder than the made for radio instant stuff.
I guess I gotta begin to wrap up the show here, but this has been like a really fascinating conversation about like these sensibilities and where they're born. But maybe, Eric, I'll give you the last word on this. Where do you see Stax's legacy in today's music scene when you kind of survey it and think about the current popular music that we're hearing now? Where do you see Stax's influence and legacy?
I think if we want to stay local again, Stax Music Academy is one of the places where you see really raw talent, like TJ was talking about. And then I guess some of the soul singers that I would I could potentially see like on a Stax label would be like Jasmine Sullivan. She's definitely like she's got that. October London, Summer Walker, Ari Lennox, Cleo Soul. I think that
you see them as being in conversation with the Stax sound.
I think so. Yeah. Janelle Monáe.
Oh yeah. Big time. This has been a really enlightening conversation. I've got a lot to sit with, but I really appreciate you guys coming on. Rob, Ericka, TJ, thank you for your time and for this journey through what Stax Records has given us. I love this conversation. I love this documentary, so I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Ericka Blount is an author, journalist, and professor at Howard University. Rob Bowman is a professor at York University in Toronto and also co-executive producer of the documentary Stax Soulsville U.S.A. TJ Armour is a freelance journalist. Just a little bit of Sam and Dave and Soul Man from 1967. Listen, you can go find that documentary. It is called Stax, Soulsville, USA. It's out right now on Crave and on Max in the United States. And that is it for the podcast today. My name is Elamin Abdulmahmoud. I'm going to be back tomorrow. I will see you then.